policy, it's an insurance policy for the purchaser, and in case there's anything wrong with the title or something they didn't catch when you bought the property, and it's very technical, but that's the purpose of it. And that title policy is the rate that they charge you for that policy is set by the state insurance board, and basically they all charge you the maximum amount. So if you went one place they wanted $1,500, you go to another title company, they're going to charge the same $1,500. The difference is, okay, what they charge you in other fees. One title company may charge you what they call an escrow fee of $150 on the buyer's side, where another company might charge you $300. And the escrow fee is a fee they charge you for basically the day of closing to sit down, do the closing, go all over the paperwork with you, notarize everything, make sure it's all done right. Well, like I said, they're not all created equal. One's charging $300, one's charging $150. Okay? So it is important who you pick as a title company. Of course, you want to pick one that's knowledgeable, been in the area for a while, knows the area, things like that. But then, you got to look at, again, like we were talking about when we were talking about qualifying for a loan and the interest rate and stuff. You need to shop around for a title company too, which again goes usually back to your agent. Here you are buying a house, you never bought one or have never bought one or haven't bought one in years. You don't know a title company. Your agent is going to usually make a suggestion. This is one I used. Would that be okay with you? You do get to pick. The buyer always get to pick. Okay? Not the seller. There's a lot of confusion out there. A lot of people think that the seller gets to pick because in most cases the seller is paying for the title policy because it's a protection for the seller. It's an insurance policy for the buyer, but it protects the seller because the seller is saying, I'm the true owner of this property. I'm giving the property to you without any unrecorded liens or anything against it. And so the buyer's taking that. So it's relieving the seller of their obligation if there is a problem by getting an insurance policy. So in most cases, the seller pays for it. It is a negotiable item in the contract. It does say buyer or seller. And depending on the situation, usually the seller pays for it, but not always. Again, it wouldn't be a negotiable item if it was always the seller paid for it, would it? So it is negotiable. So there's another thing. That's something you need to talk to your agent about. Who needs to pay for that title policy? Who do you want to pay for it? Well, if I'm your agent, as a buyer's agent, well, I think it's in your best interest as the seller pays for it, don't you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. So, that's just little things like that. So that's what the title company. We could talk again about that for a long time, but that's kind of getting off the whole, that's another entity's, that's their job. Okay? But it does bring us down to the earnest money, because when you purchase a house, once it becomes a contract, there is earnest money that is deposited normally with the title company, and it's exactly what it says. What is earnest money? It says I'm the buyer. It's good, what we call good faith money. Here's some money. I'm going to put up a certain dollar amount, showing that I really intend to purchase your house. This isn't just I want to buy your house, but I'm not going to put up any kind of cash deposit, more or less, kind of what an earnest money is.
It's just proving that they're really serious about what they're offering.
It shows that they're earnest. That's what you call it, earnest money. Okay? So how much do you put up, though? Of course, the seller's agent, and once again, back to that seller's agent wants to try to get as much as they can out of the buyer, don't they? Mm-hmm. The more they get out of the buyer, the more likely the buyer would close on the property, because if the buyer doesn't close and has no real excuse for not closing, no real verifiable reason, then the buyer could lose that earnest money and the seller could retain it. Okay? So again, if you're the buyer's agent, okay, you're going to have to put up some earnest money, but you don't want to put up any more than you have to put up, right?
Right.
Okay. So there's several ways out of any contract, bona fide reasons. But if the buyer just simply backs out of it, then it could be retained by the seller. Okay? And the reason, there's no anything cut and dry about anything.
Right.
Okay? The seller could retain that money. That's a whole legal process there, though.
Okay, let's
I'm
say,
not going to get into that.
let's
part.
say they're buying a $200,000 house, and they do negotiation about earnest money. What would be a typical earnest money amount?
Well, one thing you got to understand is real estate. There's nothing typical. I tell people that all the time. Let's go back to what would be, let's say, reasonable.
Okay.
On the seller's side, 1% of the sales price would be a reasonable amount.
Okay.
So on a $200,000 house, that would be roughly $2,000, right? But then if you're the buyer, you might not be willing to put up that much. Okay? And this is all negotiable. So you might be wanting to put up $1,000. So we put the offer in as your agent, buyer's agent. I would put it into the seller's agent, going to the seller, and we would offer them $1,000. Now the listing agent, the seller's agent, would go to work for the seller and advise him whether he felt like 1,000 was good or maybe we'd try to get more. Okay? And that's where all the negotiation. That's the reason you need an agent. That's the reason the seller needs an agent, the buyer needs an agent.
Because we're talking about a lot of money here.
Yeah, $1,000 versus $2,000. It's just an example.
Exactly.
Okay, so but on the buyer side, you got to give them enough money to show that you're interested, but you don't want to give them any more than you have to, right?
Exactly.
More than, because you could jeopardize. There could be a possibility as a buyer you would lose that money. You don't want to lose any more than you have to. Okay? Now this is looking at it from a buyer's point of view.
Right.
From the seller's point of view, they want to try to get as much as they can out of you. So if you do back out, they could retain that money possibly for the time that it was off the market and they couldn't sell it to anybody else.
Right.
So you got both sides of the fence here, don't you?
Right.
So it depends on who you're working with, the buyer or the seller.
Now,
So,
if everything goes according to plan, then that earnest money, if everything goes the way it's supposed
Closes.
to go, then that earnest money just goes towards the purchase of the house.
it is credited back to the buyer at closing yet. Goes toward their closing costs, their down payment, or whatever, their fees.
Okay.
Yes, the buyer does get that credited back to him at closing, so it's not like he loses it.
All right.
It's just again, it's good faith money. It's just, I'm earnest. Here's some money, putting it up. That's the reason it's held by the title company.
Right.
It's not held by the seller. It's not held by the buyer or the buyer's agent or anybody like that. It's held by the title company in most cases,
But
and is credited back at closing.
the title company is sort of considered like a neutral agent.
They are what we call a disinterested third party. Okay? They're not working for the buyer or the seller or anybody else. All they're doing is bringing all parties together at the closing table and finishing the transaction. And they're not working for the buyer or the seller.
Right.
They just bring it down, working under instructions of the contract, instructions from the mortgage company, things like that. They're working under those instructions. They bring everybody together and they collect all the funds. Once the funds are collected from the buyer, then they pay out the funds to every place it's supposed to go.
I got you.
That's the purpose of it.
Now, we've got about less than a minute to go here in this particular episode. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to say on this particular subject before we sign off?
Well, just like anything else, shop around for a title company.
Right, because all title companies
Are not created equal. That's right.
That'll be the main mantra to remember from this show here. Well, I want to thank our viewers out there for joining us today for Spencer Properties Presents. Hopefully you've learned a lot more information than you knew before on real estate. I want to invite you to join us again next time when we come here on the television show for these informative broadcasts. I'm Larry Wessels, your host, with Bill Spencer, the real estate instructor, as you've noticed, a broker, 21 years in the business. And for future shows, be sure to join us. We will be right here once again to answer those real estate questions.